let me introduce you briefly. Cynthia is one of the original Big Apple Lindy Hoppers. She was one of Frankie Manning's students and works with the performance team that Frankie used to choreograph for and teach and dance with. And this was in the late 80s into the 90s. And the best thing is that she collected all his stories, every little story that he told, and she put it into this book. You know, when you meet good storytellers, you always say, you should write a book, you should write a book. And of course, it's so hard to make that happen. But Cynthia did it, and I'm forever grateful to you for capturing his spirit, his words, and putting it down for us to share forever. I know there's a
Audible book as well.
Excuse me?
So I know I'm dying. But there's an Audible book as well.
Right. Yes. Yes, there is. Yeah, that was really nice when that happened. We're excited about that.
But tell us about some of the early times when you hung out with Frankie, because you were fortunate enough to hang out with Frankie Manning and I don't know, go for supper after classes and all this. And like, just tell us some stories. We're jealous.
Yeah. Well, the book actually got the idea for the book came from when I was in the Big Apple Lindy Hoppers, and we would always go out afterwards, which was at least half the fun. And Frankie would, you know, he was not somebody who wanted to dominate the conversation, but over time, some of his wonderful stories would come out, and we would, of course, ask him to tell us about them. And you know, I just recognized this is an original connection to a very, very important historic dance, and somebody should write down what his story is. And I started by doing an article for a small newspaper about him, and then I did a master's thesis about swing dancing and interviewed Frankie a lot for that. And the more I talked to him, the more I realized he remembered so much of it, and he was so great at sharing his stories, because not everybody is. There are a lot of people who were part of something, but they couldn't necessarily articulate that, their experiences. So, you know, I wrote more and more about him, and then we started doing these lecture demonstrations for children. I was a dance teacher for kids at the time, and our second grade was studying New York, and they were studying Harlem. So I brought Frankie into my school. We set up a program with showing videos and holding up photos and magazines and interviewing Frankie. And so this was second graders, and you know, people think they don't have a long attention span, but we went for 45 minutes. And then that was when the class was supposed to end, but it was going so great, and they were so interested in him that we kept going for another 45 minutes. So they sat for an hour and a half, and the only reason we stopped was because school ended. We had to stop. But anyway, it just became more and more clear that Frankie had a story to tell, and he could remember so much of it. And as I did research, it lined up with what I was finding in newspapers and magazines and photographs. So I asked him, actually in Harangue in 1993, when I was there with I had done a display for an event in 1993, and we brought it to Harangue and hung it on the walls in Fouquet's house. And I asked Frankie there if he would like to do a book together, and he said yes. So that's where it all started.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing how Frankie could remember names and dates. And I remember he was saying something about some event, and he was like, oh, it was, you know, June the 5th, and I'm sorry, I can't remember which day it was, or something like ridiculous, you know, right?
Yeah, I laugh at that too. I remember him apologizing that he couldn't remember if something happened in late 1935 or early 1936, and he was so sorry.
Yeah. And all the names and of all his the dance partners he had, or people that were in the jam circle, or the one that went on that trip. And what's amazing is that it brings those people to life. Yeah, they were his buddies, his friends, and I really just like to imagine them all doing the Lindy Hop, you know.
Yeah, he had a real gift for bringing the past to life and bringing people to life, and everybody who met him, whether they were into swing dancing or not, they recognized something special. And that was something that I found very interesting. You could go someplace with Frankie, maybe to a restaurant or something, where they had no idea who he was. And of course, in the early days, he didn't become the legend in the early days that he became. He wasn't, we knew he had done something. Excuse me?
There was no internet.
There was no internet, no. And even, I mean, I had majored in dance in college, and I barely had heard of the Savoy Ballroom or the Lindy Hop. I knew nothing about it, really.
Yeah.
I had seen sort of spin-offs of it from people who were imitating parts of it, but I hadn't seen any of the original stuff. But there was something very special about him. And so, like, you'd be in a restaurant and a waiter would like really connect, and they'd start joking around and something. I'm sure every single person who's here who knew Frankie, who was with him, saw that happen. Anyway, yeah, he was so good at, he was like a natural born storyteller. He knew how to make something interesting. And so he brought history to life. And I really believe that it was his ability to do that helped this dance grow. Because, and I love to hear from other people if the same thing happened, but you know, when I started, I was doing these great steps to this great music and I loved it. And there were, for some reason, swing dancing, I've never been able to put into words exactly what, but it draws really interesting people to it. And so, you know, I'm part of other communities, but I really particularly love being part of this community. And, yeah, so he, you know, as I learned more about the history, the dance became more meaningful and a much richer experience, because I understood that this was going back in time through decades and even centuries, and many beautiful traditions were part of what we were doing, that we were honoring.
And Frankie was such a man of the present as well. You know, he didn't live in his glory days and like, oh, back in the time, you know, call that dancing. Well, and I was at the Savoy. You know, he never. He was so joyful and happy to have everyone and new dancers coming in, every single new dancer. You know? Yeah. And Aaron's in the house apparently. Aaron's logged in. So hi, Aaron. Yeah.
Hi, Aaron. Where's we should, Erin knew Frankie so well. She has so much to tell us about him. So I'd love to hear from her also. Hi, Erin.
Tell me if it's too noisy out here. I'm on my front porch and there's quite a few cars going by this morning. I'm surprised.
Great to see you, Erin. I heard so much about, I was just gonna say, I heard so much about Erin from Frankie before I ever met her. And then she, you know, he spoke so highly of her, and it was so great when I finally met her.
Thanks, Cynthia. That's very sweet.
So where's Cynthia? I lost Cynthia. Okay. So Cynthia, yeah. When's the movie being made?
I don't know. There is somebody, you know, over the years, there's been, I'd say, about a dozen inquiries about a film, and I always happy to sit down with people and talk about it. But, you know, getting a film made is really, really hard. It's really, really, really hard. It's a big deal. So far, nothing has happened. There is one person now who's, I would say, has possibly, you know, I think this person has the connections to make it happen, but to get it to the attention of people. But it's, you know, you just never know what's going to happen. I mean, people, you know, I mean, I remember some person who was a filmmaker saying, well, it's a great story, but like, you know, did he drink? Did he do drugs? Like did he, you know, like they were looking for this sort of kind of very melodramatic story. And personally, I think the story is absolutely interesting enough, and I can absolutely see it as a wonderful film. But, you know, maybe it'll happen. And in the meantime, we're all keeping it going and making our own thing. And I think that's the most important thing.
You have to tell that producer to go look for Lennart. If you want the melodramatic dirt, Lennart is the one. Drink, everything. Lennart is the one. But
yeah, well, Lennart's quite the great raconteur himself. Yeah, no, I have a spreadsheet of all the people to connect to that, and every time someone contacts me, I share this spreadsheet, and so many of you are on it, and you know, encourage them to reach out to other people. I think this person is a swing dancer. A lot of times the people who get interested, they're swing dancers in the film business. So.
I want to just have one last question. Do you know how many languages your book has been translated into now? What's the count?
Yeah. Well, we have the French translation. That was the first one. Frankie was alive when this happened, so that was very helpful because we spent a year emailing with the translator and the person who published it. So I could ask Frankie, well, you know, he'd like to add in a couple of pictures. Is that okay? And Frankie would say, yes, I'd like to maybe take a look at them first. So I had a sense of what Frankie was looking for in a translation. And then there was a Japanese translation, and then there was an Italian translation, and now there is a Chinese translation that I believe is well underway. Maybe I think they finished the translation. They're starting to work on the photos. Of course, it's had to slow down because of what's going on, but they've been working really hard. Very, very well organized, very dedicated team. It's really exciting. I mean, one thing that I learned as a writer is you sit in your house and you do the book, and you know, Frankie and I were meeting all the time, but it's not really completed until people read it. And so these translations are wonderful because then it can get out to more people. So I'm so grateful to all the people who did the translation. It's hard work. It's a lot of work. I think it's more than people often realize, but it's very, very thrilling to me. And I know it was Frankie. He would be thrilled.
The hard work is not just the translating the words, but it's getting the rights, getting the photograph, publishing, all this, all the background stuff even. But you did all that work first. So thank you very much, Cynthia.
Frankie, with Frankie. Frankie worked really hard. We would meet every week and you know, go into more detail sometimes than he didn't think people would be interested in all the details of his life. But I was like, well, let's get them down. Let's get them recorded. And it turned out people were. I mean, we weren't really sure. I knew I was, and I knew he would say there are a few people who think everything about my life is interesting, but I don't think everybody else will be that interested. And yeah, and sing for one, many other people who are here. And fortunately, people did. I did think that his, you know, the details of his life were interesting, as well as, you know, he was an entertainer. He wanted to uplift people. So he thought the big stories were what people wanted. And I think he was probably gratified to see that all the time that he put into sharing the details were appreciated by people. I just want to say thank you so much. This was amazing. I wish we could do it every week. And I want to just, the performances were like incredible. It was so great to see all this talent out there over the world. I mean, this was like fantastic. People are so talented out there and doing such a beautiful job interpreting and reinterpreting and carrying things on. It was really, really just so special and wonderful. Thank you. And to everybody who put this together. It was fantastic.
Thank you, Cynthia. Cynthia will teach you this. Do you know this? You know what this
No.
is? Okay, so it's your thumb and your finger.
Yeah.
Like this, and you have to show it like this. Yeah. It's a heart. It's supposed to be a heart.
Oh, just like that. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like little heart. Your
right.
Yeah. So it's a little heart.
Thank you.
So this is great for Zoom and stuff because we just do this, and you know, I'm sending you hearts. Of course.
Thank you. Great. Well, my whole life is on Zoom now, so
exactly.
very come in handy.
Teach that to your kids. Of course, this is the obvious one. This is the clear one, but this little one. Yeah. Okay. And you can go like, oh look, and you.
Thank you. I will share that with my students.
Lennart?
Yeah.
Heart? Hatu? Hey, Hatu, Lennart. Hatu.